we can begin. Thank you everyone for your patience. So once more, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar on European Research Council grants. We are delighted to have an expert speaker joining us live from Brussels, where the European Commission is headquartered. For some brief housekeeping remarks, the webinar will be recorded and shared afterwards, along with the presentation. You can use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, and also use the chat if you encounter any technical issues. My colleague, Dr. Daria Buchner-Karajan, and I will be monitoring the chat and trying to fix any problems that may come up. As a reminder, we represent the EURAXESS project. That's an EU initiative to promote Europe as a research destination and strengthen cooperation between researchers in Europe and around the globe. So my colleague, Dr. Buchner-Karajan, and I work for EURAXESS North America, based in Washington, D.C., and covering all of the United States and Canada. We are a hub of EURAXESS worldwide, and on the other side of the entire EURAXESS project, you have representatives in every European nation, providing country-specific support and expertise to help you move to or collaborate with that country. And our main mandate is to inform researchers about Horizon Europe, which is the EU's 7-year framework program for research and innovation. It runs from 2021 through 2027, and ERC grants fall under Pillar 1 of Horizon Europe, which generally refers to bottom-up funding for all fields with no predetermined topics. I'll just very quickly share my screen. I like to have people see the quick visual here. Here at EURAXESS, we generally promote Pillars 1 and 2 of Horizon Europe. Pillar 1 is categorized as excellent science. You'll be learning about European Research Council grants today. And again, these are bottom-up. I'll let our main speaker go in more detail. You will hear from us in other webinars and on our website and in the past about Pillar 2, which are generally top-down open calls covering many different fields, but these topics are predetermined by the European Commission. And it's all about applying to a call with a consortium, an international consortium. So you can join from the US, Canada, any country in the world, as long as they're European partners. So I will stop my screen share there. I just wanted people to see that graphic. And you also have a chance in the next few weeks to hear about the other major component of Pillar 1, which are the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. They have mobility schemes, and one of the specific actions is called staff exchanges. Daria and I will host a webinar on October 16th. And this will be an opportunity to hear from some European-based national contact points. Today, you have not necessarily a national contact point, but rather an official from the ERC itself. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Nicholas van Oostende, who works as a scientific officer at the European Research Council Executive Agency in Brussels. He is part of the Environmental Biology, Ecology, and Evolution LS8 panel team, where he helps coordinate the execution of calls for proposals, evaluation, and selection of proposals by the ERC, as well as monitoring funded projects. So Nicholas holds a PhD in biology from Ghent University and has worked as a research scholar in oceanography at Princeton University. So I'm glad you're presenting virtually to the US and Canada as well. And in commercial aquaculture as a research and development and innovation project manager. So Dr. van Oostende, the floor is yours. Thank you for taking your evening to join us in the Americas during our morning and afternoon. I'll be in the back end supporting you. If there are any technical issues, I will speak up and let you know. So you don't need to wonder if everything's great or not. You have our support. And again, we will be monitoring the Q&A for questions. So please take it away and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jackson, for your lovely introduction and for giving me the floor here to promote the ERC's funding schemes. Welcome and thank you for attending. So this presentation is geared towards top researchers of all nationalities, so that hopefully includes all of you. A brief overview or outline of this presentation, which will include an overview of the ERC, its grant schemes, some arrangements for visiting ERC grantee labs, some submission and evaluation process nitty-gritties, some tips on preparing an application, and then we'll round off with an overview of the 2024 work program, its novelties, and its calendar. So Jackson already pointed out that the ERC is part of Horizon Europe, so no need to delve much deeper into that, except maybe to highlight the budget the ERC has at its disposal to fund this excellent science. The 16 billion euros represents 17% of the entire Europe, Horizon Europe budget, so it is quite substantial for a single program. On this slide, you see the evolution of this funding throughout the framework programs. Right now, we will be able to fund about 950 grants for the 2024 work program, which is not bad. The ERC is also the scientific council, which is a central part of the ERC. So the ERC is part of the European Commission, which provides the financing through the framework programs. It also guarantees the autonomy of the ERC. And it adopts formally the annual work programs that are established by the Scientific Council. Now, who is this council? Well, on the picture there, you see these are the 22 members, including the president, Maria Lipton. And this council is made up of eminent researchers that are appointed by the Commission. And their central role is to establish the scientific strategy. So that includes the annual programs and all of these little details that come into the crafting of the calls for the proposals, what type of evaluation criteria to use, the peer review methodology, selection of experts, etc. Their role is really to check on this agency that it performs well, that it delivers quality, and they also provide a direct communication link with the scientific community at large. So they're really representatives of the scientific community. The ERC would not be able to function without its executive agency. Those are the people, about 500 of which 130 have a scientific background, who ensure that the ERC strategy as set up by the Scientific Council is implemented. So they manage the day-to-day operations, organize peer review, evaluations, manage grant agreements, project follow-ups, and so on. On your right-hand side, you can see the ERC building on a sunny day in Brussels. I'm also giving you a couple of figures here. No need to remember those. This is just to point out that the ERC is quite a successful program. It has funded over 13,000 top researchers since its inception in 2007. Together with, of course, a cohort of PhD students, technicians, postdocs, etc., now 90,000 of them. They encompass over 89 nationalities. I'm not sure if this number is up to date, but around 90 nationalities of grant holders. And of course, all of this excellent science resulted in the recognition of the ERC grantees winning major prizes such as Nobel Prizes, field medals, etc. The ERC is unique in that it has, and I will just read that, it has a mission to encourage the highest quality research in Europe through competitive funding and to support investigator-driven frontier research across all fields on the basis of scientific excellence. And the key words here are Europe, investigator-driven frontier research, and scientific excellence. So what it means is that it is really focused on researchers from all over the world, so not exactly consortia. Those are long-term grants, they're frontier research, and they're fully bottom-up. So there is no prescription as to what field or applications you should gear your project towards. So why should you apply to an ERC grant? Well, first of all, you can really choose your research topic and your team This is your choice, only yours. You have true financial autonomy for at up to 5 years. This gives you quite some leverage to negotiate with a potential host institution, securing good working conditions. It also enables you to attract top team members, both from the EU and non-EU countries. The grants are portable within Europe, very handy if you are not satisfied with your initial host institution. And because the ERC is a quality label, it attracts additional funding and allows you to gain recognition. So in a nutshell, it provides you with independence, flexibility, and visibility. So now that I've motivated you to apply for an ERC grant, who can apply? Well, anyone can apply from anywhere in the world. There's a couple of conditions to that, in that, but in general, the grantees can keep their affiliation with their home institute as long as they spend a significant part, meaning at least 50% of their working time in Europe. That excludes field work, by the way. They can apply for additional startup funding for researchers moving to Europe. Apply for extra funding for major equipment, large facilities, field work. The team members can also be based outside of Europe, and the grantees can move with the grant, so the portability to EU or associated countries. So I now will highlight the main ERC grant schemes. So those are the 3 mono beneficiary grants that are divided according to academic maturity and who vary accordingly in total funding amount. So we have the starting grant, which is geared towards researchers having completed the PhD successfully since 2 to 7 years. That's up to 1.5 million euros for a duration of up to 5 years. Then we have the consolidated grants. Those are a little bit more senior, have completed their PhDs between 7 and 12 years ago. They can request up to 2 million euros. And then we have finally the advanced grants, and those are for researchers with a significant track record. And those researchers can apply for up to 2.5 million euros. Then on top of those, we have the synergy grants. Those are, again, not for consortia, but geared towards a synergetic group of 2 to 4 PIs. Those grants can get up to 10 million euros of funding and can last up to 6 years. And interestingly, one of the PIs can be based outside of the EU or associated countries. And then finally, we have the proof of concept grant, which is a grant aiming at bridging the gap between research and an early stage marketable innovation. Those grants are based on a lump sum of 150,000 euros and only accessible to ERC grantees. Now, I already mentioned before, you can also ask for additional funding up to 1 million euros, and that would be up to 4 million euros for synergy grants. And what we understand for what kind of costs can be covered for under those additional funding requests. They can be startup costs for PIs that are moving to the EU or an associated country from elsewhere. They can be used to purchase major equipment or access to large facilities or do major experimental field work. So a large variety of options, as long as they're justified, of course. Now that you know about funding, how can you prepare for your proposal? Now for the starting grant and the consolidated grants, the first thing you have to do is make sure that you're eligible. For that, the reference date for the calculation of the eligibility window is the 1st of January of the year of the call. So for example, for starting grant, you would be eligible if you have finished your PhD after December 2021. There are possibilities for extensions of these eligibility windows, and I will go into that just in a minute. If you had applied for an ERC call before, please check the resubmission restrictions, as there are some restrictions depending on the score you've had. Of course, you should be spending a minimum of 50% of your working time in the EU or an associated country, and depending on the grant scheme, your time commitment as a PI on the project should vary between 50% for a starting grant to 30% for an advanced grant or a synergy grant. So regarding those extensions of eligibility windows, you have a couple of them. You have maternity leave, which adds 18 months for each child for the mothers among you. You have paternity leaves, so that's documented time for each child, so that will vary very much between countries. You have long-term illness, by that we mean more than 90 days, or national service. And you also have clinical training up to 5 years after receiving your PhD. And then there's 2 recent categories for extensions. That would be the documented time of the PI's inability to work due to natural disaster or due to seeking asylum. Now, PIs from all over the world can apply to the ERC. So by that, we make no discrimination of nationality, age, current place of work, as long as you have a host institution that is based in Europe or in associated countries, and that you spend, again, 50% of your time working there. And you can move around with this grant throughout Europe. The international aspect, the international participation of PIs is actually increasing, mainly for starting and consolidators, not so much for advanced. I guess that's to be expected. And I guess that's a good thing. That's exactly what we want. We want to attract talent from all over the world. And just to give you some more numbers on that, there's about 48 non-EU or associate grantee nationalities. That's about 8% of all ERC grants are held by these nationals. The US and Canada making up the largest chunk of these grantees, a little over half. And this also includes synergy grantees, which of course can participate to these grants as well, to these projects as well. There's another option that I would like to highlight here to participate to ERC projects. Those are called implementing arrangements. This rather obscure term actually describes an international initiative to really promote the opportunities for scientists to visit and collaborate with ERC research teams, and which can partially be supported by non-European agencies. So practically speaking, say you are a US national and you have an NSF grant, and you would like to collaborate with an ERC grantee lab. That is possible, and the process works a little bit like this. So the ERC launches a call for expression of interest to its ERC grantees. The PIs reply and say, yes, we are interested, either all of the countries or a selection of countries. The ERC then proceeds and sends this list to the national agency. So the NSF, for example, in the US, or the TIPS, I believe, in Canada. This national agency then alerts and contacts interested visiting scientists. This scientist then can circle back to the original ERC PI and work out the details. And as soon as you have a letter of support, you can go back to your national funding agency, who will then evaluate this proposal and provide you some funds for travel, usually, for you to be able to do this visit. Now, gonna change gears a little bit. I'm gonna dive in through the preparation of proposals. And here I highlight to you the general proposal structure. So proposal, so it's one submission, and the proposal exists out of several parts. There is a part A, which covers the administrative form as well as the budget and resources. Then there's a part B1, which comprises a synopsis of 5 pages, and then a CV and track record of 4 pages. The CV and track record has been merged actually in the work program 2024. And then the part B2, which is the main chunk, comprises the scientific proposal as such, really going to detail of the state of the art, the objectives, methodology, etc. Then we have, of course, a host institution support letter, quite essential. Your PhD certificate, if you're applying for starting grant or consolidated grant, and then several potential annexes, such as your documents that prove your request for extension of eligibility, or some documents that are necessary for some ethics purposes. So this part B1 and B2, this is important, are submitted together. I encourage you to check the guidelines for the information for applicants, very useful. Now, once you have put together your proposal, it is important for you to choose your panel. So the ERC is structured into several panels. I will highlight some of them in a minute. And it is important to know here that the descriptors that are associated with different panels are really not exhaustive. They're not a classification. They're more a way of finding a home for your proposal. Again, any topic field is welcome, whether it's mentioned or not. You can add free keywords to make sure that the panel chair assigns the qualified reviewers to you to evaluate your proposals. So you should really put some time and effort into choosing those descriptors. Of course, it happens quite some time that one proposal does not entirely fit in a panel or domain, and that is perfectly fine. And you have the option to highlight that, and you should also explain why your proposal is cross-panel if you think it is. You should explain that in part B1 in the synopsis. Here's an overview of the different domains. So there are 3 domains: the life sciences, physical sciences and engineering, social sciences and humanities. This is really an operational division more than anything else. Each domain has several panels associated with it. So a total of, in the meantime, of 28 of them. The SH8 panel being the newest one here. And once you have chosen your panel and you have submitted your proposal, then comes the evaluation. So the evaluation principle is pretty simple. It's based on excellence, and that's pretty much the only evaluation criterion. Both your research project and the excellence of the PI is assessed, although for Work Program 2024, the main emphasis is laid on the excellence of the research project. And here it is really about assessing the groundbreaking nature of your proposal, the potential impact, and the scientific approach that is used. Quickly highlighting a couple of changes that were introduced in the Work Program 2024. So the principal investigator profile has been made less prescriptive. You have some room to add personal details. You can list up to 10 research achievements. This is really meant to provide context for your career path and also the proposal, your ability to conduct the proposal. So it's really an emphasis on your most recent achievements, since we care more about the proposal itself than all of your past achievements. Of course, this is a place to list all your prizes, fellowships, and everything you're proud of having accomplished. This is also a place to put anything that helps the panel assess your career path. So any career breaks, any life events you might have had, or any other contributions that you're making to the research community. So as I said, evaluation is primarily focused on the research project, groundbreaking nature, potential scientific impact, feasibility of the scientific approach. Of course, the intellectual capacity, creativity, and commitment of the PI is also evaluated, but really with a focus on the ability of the PI to successfully execute the project that is proposed. Okay, now how does this all work in practice? So the ERC works with a single submission, but a two-step evaluation. So during the first step, it's a remote assessment by the panel members. So that means that they only see the part B1, so the synopsis and your CV track record at this time, and they will grade you, grade your proposal in that way. Then this panel, after a couple of months, convenes and then discusses all of the proposals together, all of the different views that they have, and comes up with a ranking and scoring of your proposals. The proposals that are rejected are scored B and C, and some proposals that are not retained. This is a new thing for Work Program 2024, where there is a cap of 44 proposals being interviewed. So for some panels in LS and PE and SH, that means that proposal number 45 and up could get a score A, which means they have no restrictions to apply next year, but they are not invited for the interview. So all of those not invited or rejected proposal would get feedback. All of the proposals that are retained for step 2, score A invited, they get to step 2, and the panel members get to see your full proposals. That includes part B1, part B2, together with the budget and resources. And they will have selected external reviewers with specific expertise to be able to better judge your proposal. Then this panel meets again this time with interviews for the candidates. And again, rank a list of proposals, A and B. The A ones get funded, the Bs don't, and everybody gets feedback on their proposal. Now, so how should you prepare a proposal? So in step one, only B1. So really important part, you have 5 pages to really show the innovative, groundbreaking part of your research. Also highlight that it's feasible. Talk a little bit about the state of the art. Think that the reviewers in this first step will mostly be generalists. So make it clear, make it accessible to the broad scientific, well, I mean, in terms of the panel you chose, research community. Then part B2, yes, that's the whole proposal really. There you can really go into the nitty-gritty details. No need to repeat anything that's in the synopsis because those 2 parts are really complementary. You can really delve into the methodology, the work plan, the risk mitigation. Justify the resources you're using, meaning explaining the involvement of certain team members or certain extra resources that you might request. And I just wanted to highlight a few mythbusters maybe, that the total budget of each panel is actually demand driven. So meaning that if there's only 30 applicants, well, the budget of this panel will be accordingly divided. So it's really a zero-sum game here. Also remember that the panel descriptors do not represent scientific priorities. They're just there to help you and to help the panel chair choose the correct reviewers. The success rate is not linked to academic age, except maybe for the very junior starting grantees. We see a little dip there, but apart from that, the curve is pretty flat. The publication record is also not a decisive selection criteria. And lastly, the host institution is not an evaluation criteria, so it doesn't matter where you are based. Now I'll give you just briefly a couple of tips. I really urge you to consult the information for applicants, read it twice, 3 times. Register early, so start early on the funding and tenders portal. This is a portal that is used throughout the European Commission, so it is not specifically geared towards ERC grantees, so it can be, you need some time to fill in all of those forms. Have your documentation ready, all of your certificates, maternity leave certificates, etc. Don't be shy and contact the ERCA. Ask all your questions to the call coordinators. They'll be happy to help. And also important, get a written consent of your suggested collaborators before you submit your proposal. Just a regular email is fine. But it is rather embarrassing if during your interview you have to admit that you didn't have consent of one of your listed collaborators. Now I will proceed to a summary of the novelties that are apparent in the that are implemented in the work program 2024. So the assessment of the proposal, there's now much more emphasis on the research part instead of the PI career part. Groundbreaking, ambitious, feasible. The PI profile, the short narrative and the combined CV and bio, really an opportunity to give context to who you are as a researcher, list your accomplishments. The evaluation as procedure as such, so there is this 44 interview cap that was implemented in step 2. And then, of course, a non-restrictive A not invited category who can reapply next year. Another thing is for advanced grants only, there is a pilot that will be running using a lump sum financing model. So it's one amount payment that is solely based on the work done. So no milestones to be ticked off. No, it's the effort that counts. And then finally, the panels. I have mentioned before, there's a new panel, SH8, and there's a slight change in description of the two LS panels, LS3 and LS5. And then probably the most important slide of this today is the call calendar of the work program 2024. So here you see the different deadlines that are listed for the different grants. So there is still time. Apply for those grants. And the budgets you can see accordingly divided around the same amount. But bear in mind, of course, that the maximum budget or funding amount between the grants varies. With that, I would like to point you to our website where you can find a trove of information about all of those things that I've just briefly touched upon. My colleagues have made very nice videos for you to watch about what to consider, how to fill an application, how the interview process works, etc. And then finally, I would like to thank you for still being here with me, and I'll be happy to take any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. That was great, comprehensive, and I also want to thank you for your consent to share that presentation afterwards. So for everyone in the audience, for everyone watching the recording, there will be a PDF of this presentation that we will link to. You'll get this automated email tomorrow if you've registered, whether or not you're attending, and it will also be on the main event webpage on our EURAXESS North America portal. So if you already have that open or bookmarked, you can refresh it as early as tonight, and we expect to have that. So what I'd like to do is invite you to open up the Q&A box. I also am going to go through some of the questions received during registration, and the ones that are more on topic for ERC grants in general, I'll be happy to read out. I will perhaps ask you to elaborate slightly on part of your presentation. Someone just asks if you can explain and maybe speak more to common reasons why applications are not selected. And I don't know if this is the intent of the original question, but if there's any unique dynamics that the ERC notices from applicants from North America, or any tips for researchers of all nationalities based in Canada and the US that they should keep in mind, perhaps academic, cultural differences, things like that might help their application. I'll continue to monitor the Q&A session, or the Q&A box rather. I invite all the attendees to share, and I also will pull some of the questions from registration. So I'm keeping an eye on everything, and I defer to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot for the question. So the first one being the common reason why proposals usually get refused or rejected. I would say that the most common one would be that it's the research that is proposed is incremental, meaning that people or PIs just tend to do more of the same. So what the ERC panels really are looking for is an ambitious idea. So, I mean, those are 5-year projects, so you can really have the time to do something meaningful in 5 years. This, I think, being the main difference between more traditional funds available, which are usually 3 years, with these extra 2 years, you can really do something big. So that I think would be one of the key aspects. Also, the aspect of feasibility, of course, it still should be feasible. Yet, the element of risk is acceptable and even encouraged to some extent, as long as there is, a proper mitigation plan. And then with regard to the applicants from Canada or US, I'm not aware that there is a systematic higher rejection rate than for others applicants. So yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that.
I think it's encouraging, perhaps for the audience, that in terms of raw numbers, I haven't looked at relative to population, but U.S. and Canadian-based applicants have a very large number, I believe, top 3 out of all the third countries of applications outside of Europe.
Yeah, I guess one of the advantages that applicants from those countries have, I mean, if at least if they're native English speakers, is the quality of the language and the presentation, which should not be a criteria, but still introduces some biases. The quality of how the proposal is written, of course, is important.
Thank you. Could I shared a list in the chat of, just for clarity's sake, the EU member states, and then also a link to the European Commission's list of Horizon Europe associated countries. Briefly, could you describe in your own words what does it mean to be an associated country? And then I'm happy to also add on to this, but someone asks about the context of Canada, which for those that aren't aware is in the process currently of negotiating with the European Commission associated country status within Horizon Europe. I'll be happy to speak more to this in just a moment, but I want to give the floor first to Nicholas.
Yeah. So as I understand, associated countries are, I think there's about 16 of them. For example, Turkey, Israel, Bosnia-Herzegovina. So those are countries that actually contribute to the funding of the program, to allow their nationals to be able to compete for ERC grants. So it's a matter of country agreements with the European Commission.
And in the case of Canada, I'll just speak to this. So if you can say, with the exception of perhaps the very, very small micronations in Europe, basically the entire continent and many of the neighbors in the wider region either are EU member states or associated countries. So I believe it's 43 countries currently, 27 EU member states, and then, as you mentioned, Nicholas, 16 associated countries. One novelty of Horizon Europe that wasn't present in the previous 7-year framework programs of the European Commission has been that before it was a requirement that in order to associate and have the European Commission and a country come to this agreement and pay into the budget and get access to the framework program, they had to be in the general vicinity of Europe. And what we actually saw is about 2.5 months ago, New Zealand became the first country to associate to Horizon Europe, but is clearly not in or around Europe. Now, one thing that makes their association to Horizon Europe unique is that they only associated to Pillar 2. And as I very briefly mentioned, and as Dr. Van Ostende had in his overall graphic or slide showing the different pillars of Horizon Europe, Pillar 2 are the top-down open calls that are predetermined by the European Commission, and it's all about international research consortia. So what this means is researchers based in New Zealand are able to participate on equal terms, almost as if they were representing an EU member state. In the case of Canada, they are negotiating along similar lines. So if and when Canada becomes an associated country, it would only be for Pillar 2, and the participation of researchers who are based in Canada, whether they're Canadians or not, under Pillar 1 for something like an ERC grant would not remain changed. It would not change from how it is currently. So if and when we have the good news that Canada associates to Horizon Europe, nothing would change with respect to ERC grants or Marie Skłodowska Actions fellowships. So I hope that answers the question. People are welcome to ask clarifying remarks or just by adding a new question. I will mark that as addressed. Do you mind elaborating? Someone else asked on the interview cap. I think you can see that question, so I'll leave it to you.
Yes, so the 44 interview cap. A good question. So that pertains to step 2 only. So meaning there can be as many submissions as possible to a certain panel. So usually, depending on the panel, it can be like 100 or 120. In any case, the budget is fixed at that point. And so the 44 number is really an operational cap, meaning that this is the number of proposals and interviews that a panel can handle to really be able to thoroughly and with keeping the same quality assess those proposals. So those are really exceptions more than the norm. This was really introduced to ensure quality and to make sure that certain panels are not overwhelmed by proposals. I hope this answered your question. And there was another question yes, about the collaborations and starting grants. Yes, starting grantees can have collaborators. Anyone can have collaborators. Those are big projects, so we don't expect you to do anything or everything by yourself. Say you have a genomics aspect of a model or a modeling aspect that you are not an expert in. Well, that would be a good thing to have a collaborator that is an expert in those things. So yes, and these team members can be outside of your lab.
Thank you. I'm also going through the questions submitted during registration, and someone asks about the case of Switzerland. I'll start by just saying that Switzerland was previously associated to the prior framework programs. However, for the current Horizon Europe framework program, it is not associated. So could you explain how a researcher, let's say based in North America, interested in Switzerland, what options are or are not available to them? I think, and if you're looking at guides from prior to 2021, you'll be finding outdated information. So I know in the past, we'll recommend people, search widely, look at YouTube videos from maybe the last year or two, and just say, be aware there'll be small changes to the novelties in every year, because you were mentioning, for example, 2024 call differences. But in the case of how the ERC operates within the 7-year period of each framework program, anything you're seeing prior to 2021 is referencing the Horizon 2020 or an earlier framework program, and therefore will not be relevant. And the information with regards to Switzerland will be very out of date. So I was wondering if you could just provide guidance to anyone interested in Switzerland.
No, absolutely, Jackson. So these associations are really a political issue. So nothing to do with ERC or Horizon Europe as such. And in the case of Switzerland, well, they're currently not associated. They have stepped out of that. And as far as I know, there is no association on the horizon, at least not in the near future. So if you're from North America and you want to apply for an ERC grant, I would suggest finding another host country.
And for those absolutely set on it, I do believe the Swiss government may have set up a sort of parallel scheme to more or less replicate something along those lines. So you can go on the Swiss National Funding Agency's website and find more information about that. I will also just add, we commonly get questions about the United Kingdom. Brexit, very famously, it took a long time, and there were a lot of transitional arrangements that were in place. So there was sort of an asterisk with potential funding if certain future outcomes did or didn't go a certain way. It was all very complex, but in recent weeks, actually, the European Commission and the United Kingdom jointly announced that starting January 1st, 2024, the UK will be an associated country within Horizon Europe. So unless you have anything else to add, I just want to let people know that between 2021 and 2023, this 3-year period of a bit of uncertainty and without any long-term confirmation, will sort of quote unquote go back to normal beginning on January 1st. I'll jump in and try to take a quick summary or try to summarize, I think, some of your expert answers. Someone asks about if third countries are eligible to apply. When we're referring to EU member states and associated countries and third countries, Generally, in this case, we're referencing, in simple terms, sort of the nationality of the host institute, if you want to phrase it that way. So researchers of any nationality based in any country in the world are eligible for ERC grants. Of course, if you meet all the requirements about how many years post-PhD you are and the eligibility windows and things like that. However, this refers to the country to which you would go. So you could go to any EU member states, any of the 16 associated countries, with the exception of New Zealand, which is not associated to Pillar 1, nor will Canada be if it becomes an associated country. So I would take a look at the 2 links that I had sent earlier and consider any of those countries. And as Nicholas mentioned earlier, the ERC grants are portable. So if you find that it's not working in your host institute or in that host country, you can change to another one. So if I haven't answered that question, please do write a follow-up. Other than that, I will invite Nicholas to join me in reading some of the other questions. Someone asked during registration a similar question. So whether it's South Africa, Vietnam, whatever country you may be from or may be living in, you can go to any of the European Union member state countries or associated countries is an ERC grantee.
Okay, thank you. I see there's another question regarding this extension for eligibility windows. This is a particular case where this person received a PhD in December 2016, had a baby, and wonders if she's eligible to apply for a starting grant. So the answer to that question is yes, because you have 18 months of extension. And then until when she's eligible to apply. So let me do the math here. For a starting grant, I think your time is running out because that would mean you're extended to June 2018. No, I think you're still good to apply for a 2025 starting grant. Yes, sorry, I had to do a little math here.
We put you on the spot
Okay,
with that question and the live math.
Yeah.
One thing I'm doing in the chat is I'm putting a link to the ERC's website that lists national contact points. So in many third countries, as they're called around the world, there may be national contact points for the ERC or for any Horizon Europe program that would be local-based experts that can answer your queries. In the case of the United States and Canada, currently there are no NCPs at all. So what we do is we encourage anyone to sort of pick a European country you may be interested in. It doesn't need to be anything official, and contact an ERC, National Contact Point, or NCP in that country. They respond by email in English, oftentimes in the host language of that country as well, or the home language of that country. But you can write them in English; they will respond promptly, and they're great email communicators. So feel free to pick anyone from that list if you want to have an answer in writing.
Okay, and I see another question here. We'll just read it. If you're a postdoc with a project idea for a starting grant, and you don't hold a researcher position in any EU-based institution, how would you go about pairing with a host institution for your project? Well, I guess the first step is getting a letter of support of a host institution. So that, of course, can be tricky, especially if you don't, they don't know you, you don't have your own funding. But this might be an option to look for ERC grantee labs that could host you or you could collaborate with. And the bonus of doing that, of course, is that you get direct access to the experience of an ERC grantee. So that would be my suggestion.
I'll also just mention that sometimes you'll find universities will post to the EURAXESS jobs, funding, and hosting portals. They all exist with the same interface in parallel to each other. Opportunities because they want you to apply for an ERC grant or a Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Fellowship with a letter of support from them as a host institute because they want to receive you, largely because your salary is paid by the European Commission and not by them. So you can go to jobs.euraxess.org. I'll also share a link. And then if you simply click the hosting button on that page, you may find some universities that have put their posting offers there. In parallel to that, you can also register for a free personal account. It's like a slightly less interactive version of LinkedIn. where on the EURAXESS portal, people can upload a free profile, mark it as public, and then hope that other people will find you and reach out to others and sort of network from there. We're also happy as EURAXESS North America to engage in any sort of networking or brokerage or try to bring people together for the sake of making connections. It is our mandate to sort of bridge North America and Europe for all things research related. So do feel free to contact us by email. My colleague, I think, shared all of our social media channels and website and email earlier in the chat, and I'll do it as well in the follow-up email tomorrow. So I hope that's a starting point for you. And yeah, you can see that we're continuing to share some resources in the chat. I'll maybe leave it open for another minute just in case there are any follow-up questions. I'll also quickly review the additional questions that may have been submitted during registration to see if I've missed anything. I think you've done a great job of giving some comprehensive answers here. Someone had asked previously about ERC grants in Canada. I think when I spoke to the South Africa or Vietnam example, it would be quite similar in the sense that currently Canada is a third country. If and when Canada associates, I'd be very pleased when that happens. Nothing would change for Pillar 1 or ERC grants. So everything would continue as normal. A Canadian or researcher based in Canada would apply to a European Union member state or other associated country as the host institute, and then go to Europe for that. Maybe we'll close with this last question.
Yeah, sure. So the question is, the date considered is the PhD defense or the date of PhD diploma? So here, this has actually changed, I think, since 2023. It's the date of the PhD defense. And this has been changed just to, let's say, harmonize the fact that different countries have different ways of or timings to give the PhD diploma. So the defense date is really the important one here.
Well, thank you so much. I think you've answered all of the questions from the audience. We will continue to be available by email. So please do message us at northamerica@euraxess.net with any questions, and my colleague and I will get back to you as soon as we can. She's also sharing in the chat a link to our October 16th webinar on the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions staff exchanges. In recent months, we've also held a webinar on the postdoctoral fellowships. So if you're interested in this European Commission dynamic of Pillar 1, bottom-up funding for researcher mobility and great ideas, the MSCA are a great way not only to go to Europe, but for institutions in the US and Canada to receive fellows from Europe. So that one goes in both directions. So we're very pleased you joined us today. And thank you again, Dr. Van Ostende, for the great information. We look forward to sharing your slides tomorrow in the follow-up email that everyone will get. I'll leave it to you for some closing words, and then we'll end the webinar and wish everyone well.
Well, thank you for your access, and thank you all for joining. Very, very pleasant to see that there's a lot of interest in this. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.